Abib! What's happening?
Oh man, what is up?
The human bobblehead here.
Yeah, we got a nice one today.
Look at all these injured guys. Look at this. I got Christian McCaffrey. I got all these dusty bobbleheads. These guys used to be in their prime. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. I got a Zeke bobblehead. Look at this. Look
Are
at
those
this.
bobbleheads or voodoo dolls?
No, Zeke!
They're voodoo dolls. This is all on you.
Zeke. This is so great. Like he's back with the Cowboys. It's so fun. That bobblehead was pre his stint with the Patriots. That was pre-Patriots. I got this. I got Jeff Janis and Aaron Rodgers, more dusty players. The only guy I've got that's not dust. The only bobblehead I have that's not dust is my Lamar Jackson.
All right, take care of that one. We don't need any more injuries.
The only one that we still have that's fresh and playing well. And the rest of these guys are either injured or they're terrible. The Lamar Jackson one actually is broken.
Oh God,
his leg. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to jinx it. Lamar, please stay healthy. We need you. This offense is looking pretty exciting, actually, in Baltimore. We'll certainly talk about that in a little bit. There's a lot to talk about. We got a late night show with Abib. He's a busy man. He's got a busy life, but I wanted to make sure we get him on at all costs. I'm in my 40s. 10 o'clock shows, streaming at 10 and recording at 10 is not easy for me, but I'm going to do it. I've done it before. We did it with Nate Liss with the Sonic Truth. We used to record at night. He's on the West Coast, so I'm gonna have to reach back years into my history with the Sonic Truth to kind of remember how I would muster, how I would summon the energy at 10 o'clock at night for an old man. I have the Athletic Brewing, my non-alcoholic. It tastes just like an IPA. If anyone out there has a connection to a company that does non-alcoholic beer or alcoholic beverages too, seltzers, whatever it is, anything with THC that you want to market to an audience that is ready to consume it, I'm your guy. Podfather at rotounderworld.com. Podfather at rotounderworld.com. We could use one of these beverage sponsors like Athletic Brewing, so let me know. Now, Abib, you are the host of the First and 15 podcast, which is on the Player Profiler Network. It's very popular. Talk to us about this show, what you do, how you put it together, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of us who kind of started in this space, it started with the passion of football, passion of fantasy football. Really, it was me and one of my co-hosts, Deo, constantly going at it, constantly arguing, constantly, kind of battling each other on player takes and, who's, whether or not, a guy was going to break out or, a guy was good or not. I mean, and we would just go into some just very in-depth conversation. And during a couple of these conversations is my brother-in-law, Chris, who's obviously the third member of the pod. One day said, you guys just need to put this all on wax. You guys need to record this. This is absolutely hilarious, yet informative. And yeah, why not kind of share it with the masses? And we got in front of the camera and it's just kind of a very laid back, we've known each other for decades since childhood. So it's just something that kind of, flows. It's a show where, let's call it not arguing, but discussions amongst friends, about a sport we love. So, yeah.
Great rapport, great information. You hit it. Hey, we have a high standard for the types of programming that we put on here at the Player Profiler network of shows, and you're certainly up to that standard. We're happy to have you, and I'm happy to have you on the Mind of Mansion program, your first ride here, your first ride. So which player impressed you the most week one?
Ooh, that is a tough question. But I think it's a player that
there weren't that many players that did well.
There weren't that many players.
I know it was a pretty easy question.
It was a bad week. It was a bad week across the board. But we all had kind of these preconceived notions and beliefs heading into the week. So some of those priors were confirmed, and some of them, ran into a brick wall. But one guy that kind of impressed me the most, and who I was, subtly kind of, gaining shares towards the end, was Tony Pollard. He's a guy that, early in the offseason, I was kind of, I call it at times a trap where we go for the guy who's the value. It's an ambiguous situation where we say this guy's going later, so he's the value. Right. Well, the guy who's going later is not necessarily always the value. A value is not always a value. And those backfields are the ones that we love to target. And I just saw Tony Pollard, hearing the tea leaves that, he's healthy now. Maybe it took him a little bit longer to recover from the injury. Going to a new system with a new O-line coach and, him looking a little bit more spry and them wanting to pass a little bit more. It just seemed like a situation where this guy who we were drafting at the back end of the first round may potentially have a little bit of a bounce back. And so I just love where he was going in drafts. And this is kind of it's kind of a way, how in DFS sometimes we'll, take the contrarian route, where there was just so much news going, positive news or talk about Spears and him being the value play and so many people on him. So I always like to look at situations like that where it's not clear, is there an advantage to be gained if I just sort of kind of take a contrarian route? And the more I dived into it, the more I started kind of really, liking where Pollard was going in drafts, and seeing him this past week was a huge plus. So he's definitely someone who impressed me quite a bit.
Yeah, I like that backfield too to target. I just ended up with Pollard. I mean, I've shared a lot of my expert league teams and have some Pollard. Didn't get any Spears. Here's the thing: Pollard is one of the most efficient running backs in the league for like 4 years.
Yeah.
Spears, very efficient as a rookie, but one guy got the contract, is the veteran. The other guy is still on his rookie deal, and is technically the backup.
Absolutely.
Spears aspires to be Pollard one day. So why not just draft the real thing?
Yeah.
Basically, Spears' upside is one day he could be Tony Pollard. But they have Pollard. Yeah. So that would be the guy to draft. And then in later years, or situationally, yes, Spears will absolutely be an interesting play. No question about it. But Spears, very much like a Jalil McLaughlin to me. Whereas Pollard, a more explosive, more active in the passing game, better receiving option than, say, Javonte Williams on what I thought was going to be a better offense. Now I don't know. Those two offenses, they're both it's tough. Yeah. Very tough. We'll see. But I like it. I like Pollard. He's clearly the bell cow. To me, he looked a lot like Rachaad White. They had very similar production. They both had like 18 fantasy points last week. And he's one of these like 6-foot running backs who glides around out there. And it was great to see him ripping off long runs. I think that Rachaad White will do the same. But that's very similar player, similar situation.
Yep.
Except you have Pollard going like 4 rounds later than Rachaad White. Pollard ended up being a better value. It's cool. Now, disappointing player. Like who was just not what you thought he was?
Oh man, I mean, can we just throw a whole position in there and just say quarterbacks in general? But I mean, if I had to kind of pick one, I would definitely say Caleb Williams. I mean, that is not what we wanted to see. And I was definitely on team Jaden Daniels. I think he's probably my highest owned quarterback. I probably lost some percentage there down the stretch once he took off in the preseason. But I was definitely drafting him well ahead of Caleb, throughout the majority of the offseason. But still, I viewed this Bears offense as one that could have some firepower through the air. I didn't mind picking up some Swift later on. And I was okay with the idea of, okay, let me just grab a receiver from this Bears passing game, whether it was DJ Moore or Dunce. I probably, I shied away from Keenan just given the age and him potentially falling off the cliff. But I thought that this offense was really going to provide us some fantasy studs and some week-to-week production. And just seeing that, granted, first week, new system, new players. I get it. We need some time to gel. The Titans defense as well. They brought in a lot of guys, so they just may be, better. That's always a side note.
I think that's the problem because the Titans had one of the best front sevens in the sport. They always just a weak secondary. Like their back line has always been the liability, but the Bears really didn't have anyone that could challenge deep. They're more of a lateral routes, down the seam, cutting across with the crossing routes. That's their system. It's not really, hey, we're going to challenge this secondary deep. So the Titans could keep guys like Keenan Allen in front of them most of the game. And what would they have? 200 yards on offense? At most, is that what the Bears could muster here?
Yeah,
not even. I think they had closer to like 180.
Yeah,
it's embarrassing.
It was a little. I was a little taken back by how inaccurate he was. He looked flustered. Again, rookie first game. I get it, but you want them to at least show you a few plays. They don't even need to be wild plays, but just making routine throws, seeing the defense, something. And that to me worries because what that does is it really reduces confidence in being able to start any of those guys in a redraft league. It's almost like a situation where I need to see something. This isn't a guy that's been in the year before and just had a bad game. At least with Joe Burrow, we've seen it in the past. I haven't seen it with Caleb. I haven't seen it in the NFL. So what do we do with the DJ Moore? What do we do with the Keenan Allen? What do we do with anyone?
You start DJ Moore because Adunze's out for at least a week, probably 2 or 3 weeks with this sprained MCL. They need to hold him out for at least a couple weeks. They cannot rush him back. That would be irresponsible. Now we have Keenan Allen. He's out with a heel injury. He's just losing body parts. Like, I just feel like things are falling off of him, kneecaps falling off of him. But he's the type of guy where it's always going to be a different, super random injury.
Yeah,
there's always going to be a body part you haven't heard anyone hurt in a while. And like, oh, I didn't know you could hurt that. It's going to be like shin splints, a heel, a toenail. It's going to be like a sprained forearm. Like, these are the things when it's just leaking motor oil, these old cars, these old sports cars, these classic cars, that's Keenan Allen. But he's going to play. They're going to give him a practice off, then he's going to be limited, then he's going to be a full practice, and then he's going to play, and he's going to produce. I think you go back to it. I think you say Titans had a front seven that would give any rookie quarterback nightmares. Go back to DJ Moore. Go back to Keenan Allen, especially with Noah Dunze. Giving you confidence.
We'll see. Right? We'll see. I mean, DJ, you drafted DJ so high that he's probably
you're not benching DJ Moore.
Yeah, you're not benching him, but I'd like to have a little bit more confidence in in the play. But we'll see.
46-point total. They're at Houston. They're coming down to your neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean he's not coming to an easy situation.
They're going to be playing from behind like they were before. Houston does. They have some quality defenders as well. Yeah, they've really beefed up the defense. It's a good team. Houston's a great team. The game flow should help the passing game. I don't know about DeAndre Swift though. Yeah. We'll see about DeAndre Swift.
Yeah,
we'll see. One day maybe Roschon Johnson will be active, and we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I'm after seeing Tyler Johnson come in and produce for Puka Nacua, I'm like, I'm not giving up on my truthers, man. You're gonna have to, pry Roschon Johnson from my cold dead fingers. I'll tell you that right now. But yeah, these Konami quarterbacks, the Jaden Daniels, the Anthony Richardsons, the Lamar Jacksons.
Yeah.
I mean, they dominated the pocket passers last week. It was crazy.
Absolutely.
It was great. I mean, we talk about Konami quarterbacks all the time in fantasy
Yeah.
football, but week 1 was the most extreme I'd ever seen it. Like, if you didn't have a quarterback that was running, you were dead.
Yeah. It's almost as if you kind of go through these cycles and shifts in the NFL. We went from like the workhorse backs and teams, really kind of, having the offense flow through the running game. And then you had this massive shift to where teams were, mostly, scoring points through the air. And so I wonder, it's only 1 week again. So it's always hard to know if this is going to be the tail of this season. But I wonder if maybe we're seeing a shift. Maybe a lot of teams in the offseason said, hey, we got beat in the air, or hey, teams in our division, have a strong passing game. Let's improve our secondary. Tennessee went out and got, cornerback, Snead from, the Chiefs. And so are these, our teams sort of kind of, prepping for the passing game, and are they set up to stop the pass, making them a little bit weaker in the run game? Are they set up for pass rushing, but not necessarily set up for the run game? So, it's definitely a, question. So we may see the return of some of the running backs.
Swift dominated the touches. He had like a 68% snap share. I mean, he was the main guy. But the game flow is going to be challenging for him. Going on the road to Houston, I don't love it for the running game this particular week. But DeAndre Swift's going to have weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, DeAndre Swift's going to have weeks. Given the usage, just based on usage alone, not necessarily what we think is going to produce this week, he's a buy low. Yeah. He's absolutely a buy low.
He was one of my contrarian plays as well. It's funny. I think if I had like kind of one major takeaway outside of just the terrible passing game throughout the quarterback play throughout the league, the other takeaway from a fantasy standpoint is that dead zone this year was very, very much alive, very fruitful. And it's something that I was just loving being, taking quarter or running backs in that area. I mean, there were just so many. And, and if you could just obviously you want to be overweight on the guys that pop and the guys that hit, and you want to fade, the guys like Zamir, certain running backs that may not be able to kind of, live up to you
didn't need to take Zamir White.
You didn't need to. Yeah.
You didn't need to take him.
Many. You didn't have to take them.
You didn't. There were options available a round or two earlier that were so much better. Were in better teams, active in the passing game. Tony Pollard, a great example. Tony Pollard's the prime example of this. But now DeAndre Swift is looking like he's going to be a bell cow, and we'll talk more. I mean, we're going to talk about we have a lot of these guys to talk about. On the show sheet, I'm just so glad that you mentioned this, because it's been the theme for years that the dead zone is the alive zone, and the dead zone is where we do our running back shopping. Yeah. And this year it was tough because there was so many great choices.
Yeah.
Right now, I wish Najee Harris had done a little more. He was another one. He was another contrarian play where you were just talking about when you say contrarian, you're talking about the gross options. The guys where people are like, or I'm bored of player X. I used to love player X. He used to be sexy. Now we're bored of him.
What's this? Oh, I'm loving it, though. Like it.
Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program. Another doctor joining the show. It's amazing. He is one of the best high-stakes players, the host of the First and 15 podcast, and just a true pleasure. A late night with the mind. A late night in the mansion is here. It is Abib Agbetoba. Talk to me.
Dude, you killed it. I love it. I feel like I want to get up and just get in my MJ walk.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I need
From
to
North Carolina. Like that. From the state of Texas, the great state of Texas.
Yes,
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go, Abib. Here we go. Who's going to carry the rock in Miami this week? What's going to be the touch breakdown?
I think we're going to probably see quite a bit of A-Chain, and I think we're probably going to see quite a bit of Jeff Wilson. I think they kind of laid out the framework, which was, if you think about it, very similar to last year. Only they've expanded A-Chan's passing game role. And they, I think, had to do so out of necessity because they don't really have a lot of great options, or at least options that they feel very comfortable in. Why they signed OBJ, I have no clue. And then obviously Malik Washington was out last week, so I think he filled that role out of necessity. Is that something that's going to continue? That I do not know, but I don't think that they want A-Chan getting 20 carries plus week 2 of the season. So I think Jeff Wilson is going to carry that burden quite a bit. And I would like to remind people, okay, remember, before Jeff Wilson got hurt, he actually looked pretty good. Remember, he was that guy that we were, drafting as a high-end handcuff. So
he's this guy. This guy's tough.
Yeah.
This Jeff Wilson, man, going back to his time in San Francisco, this guy's nails. There's just some guys that you're like, man, you're not going to mess with him. He's one of those dark alley guys, man. Like you wouldn't want to, I don't know why, but like there's some guys where I'm like, yeah, I want him on my team.
Yeah.
I want him on my team. If we're going to be, if we're going to be in a tricky situation, you want a guy like Jeff Wilson on your team.
Yeah. I know we all want Jalen Wright, okay, but you got to look at what they're showing us. And I think I've had to learn this lesson the hard way too many times, and I'm still learning it. You fall in love with players, and that team's coaches, they don't love the player as much as you love them. So I try to really view it objectively, and then kind of bring in my own subjective take and opinion. So regardless of what we think of Jalen Wright, it was Jeff Wilson who was getting the carries last week. So I think definitely if I'm in a running back bind or a pinch and I need to start someone, it's definitely going to be Wilson over Wright for me.
This was my argument for drafting Eric Gray late. Now, New York is where fantasy points go to die. I get it. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
But that's the same process. It's the guy that we've forgotten about who, there was some excitement around Eric Gray and, as a pass catcher out of Oklahoma. Like, this guy's pretty nifty. This guy could be a PPR back, right? But no, now we've moved on to Tyrone Tracy. But in real life, what'll happen is the Jeff Wilson is the guy that's going to get the touches when the opportunities presents themselves. And the coaches just need to build trust in rookies, and it takes time. And as much as we want it to be Jalen Wright, now he's probably going to be elevated to the active roster, which is great news. And then all we can hope for is that he gets some touches and he breaks a long run. This is what we're all praying for. This is the number one thing we need to happen on Thursday night on Amazon is the Jalen Wright 30-yard run. We need that, so everyone should be hoping for that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, if you need running back help this week, start Jeff Wilson. I give you permission.
Yeah. Yes, it's fantasy football is, we do the same thing every year. And we actually talked about it this year as well. One of our shows is based on the idea that we are a little bit too overconfident in who we think the handcuff is.
Always.
Because even the handcuff listed and that is, expected, a player may go down and they just may bring in someone else, Last year I probably had more Jerome Ford shares than anybody else. And I flopped the nuts, not to wish injury on anyone else, but Chubb goes out very early in the season. I'm sitting here with all of these Jerome Ford shares. And what do? They go bring in old, dusty Kareem Hunt. And we all watched him play. But he got the money touches. He got the receptions. He got the third down. He got the hurry up. He got the 2-minute. And he got the goal line. And he did well at the goal line. And so, sometimes these situations, I try not to invest too much capital in these guys. You want some because, if they do fall into that opportunity, they're, sometimes plug and play. But, sometimes you just got to be very, very cautious about constantly hitting the button on like a Blake Corum in the 8th round. Maybe wait a little bit, We want to get those guys. We definitely want to get those guys. But I don't want to like have 100% of, Jalen Wright, 9th round shares and then miss out on some like really, guys who can be very productive, only to come to find that, I'm not able to use a Jalen Wright until like week 15, 16, where guys are sitting and guys are hurt and things like that.
I think there's a pretty big difference between Blake Corum and Jalen Wright. I think Jalen Wright's a very nice slasher. I think he's the perfect fit for the system.
Yeah.
He was, a fun player at Tennessee. Blake Corum is a stud. Blake Corum is gonna be super productive in this league at some point.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Devon Achane has not yet played or practiced, so he was held out of practice on Monday. Did he practice today?
I think he was limited today. There's some clips of him going through, very, very limited clips of him going through warm-up that I think the caption was, he looks good or does not look hurt. Who knows what that means? We saw what happened with CMC. Be ready, He's
going to play. Okay, he's going to play.
Yeah.
We know he's going to play. All right, so we missed practice on Monday. He's going to play. It's going to be Achane. It's going to be Achane out of the backfield. He's basically their third receiver now. This is what happens, man. You don't have a number 3 and you don't have a tight end. Naturally, targets are going to flow to the running back. It just makes sense. And in that context, man, Achane could outproduce Jahmyr Gibbs just based on the law of the conservation of targets and how many options there are. The Lions can throw to Amon-Ra St. Brown. They can throw now to apparently Jameson Williams is a superstar and Sam Laporta. So they have so many options, especially in the shorter and intermediate areas of the football field, that's gonna cannibalize some possible targets from Jahmyr Gibbs, where, I mean, it makes sense. It makes me question my fade of Achane, which was based strictly on ADP and the fact that he was 190 pounds. And I'm like, I don't do this.
Yeah.
I don't do this. The injury track record and the size at that ADP, I'm not doing it. Right? And now he's already hurt, He's going to play through it, but he will miss games. I mean, it's as certain as I am about any player and what's going to happen with them this year is that Achane's going to miss some games. It's going to be like a wrist. It's going to be an ankle. It's going to be it's just what happens with these guys.
Yeah.
It's just what happens. And I wasn't drafting Gibbs either. It was most of these running backs I just was not drafting for the reason you alluded to earlier, which was the dead zone was very much alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was why. It's like, I got to get my receivers now because good luck finding production out of these receivers in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. I mean, best of luck to you, sir. Best of luck. So just structurally, didn't end up with a lot of Gibbs, didn't end up with a lot of H. So I can sit back and be like, well, this is interesting. I can almost look at this from an intellectual exercise and be like, one guy's a satellite back with explosiveness. The other guy's a satellite back with explosiveness. They're both in great offenses. But this guy's in a little bit better situation.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that was actually, something that I think we kind of all looked at and talked about. I should say all, but we definitely talked about as far as why is Gibbs going ahead of Achane. Co-host Deo is a huge Achane guy. He terms him the best running back in NFL history, tongue in cheek, but he's, obviously clearly on him. But yeah, David Montgomery isn't going anywhere. I mean, if you've ever heard Dan Campbell talk about, David Montgomery, that he's going to be a fixture in that offense. So, I mean, I do have some Gibbs shares because, with, doing as many teams and drafts as I do, the chaos that is the NFL, guys get hurt, you don't want to be without some of these guys that can just absolutely break, the slate, break a tournament.
Correct.
But
Correct.
I'm kind of with you on that, where, yeah, I want to get my wide receivers early. With the exception of those kind of top three guys, and honestly, I should say top two, because I was kind of in the camp of, CMC got way a little too many carries last year. Let me, slide on over to Brees and Bijan. But after those guys, like, yeah, I was definitely, with you on loading up on the wide receivers.
You have to pay for what you put in. If you're going to have that kind of workload last year, you can't just copy and paste it into 2024.
Absolutely.
You're going to pay the price. Maybe you didn't pay last year, you're going to pay this year. So Christian McCaffrey is a well-known injury risk because he's so good at 200 pounds that coaches can't resist overusing him. And so one of the least surprising things I've seen was Christian McCaffrey missing week 1. And then there will be other weeks that he misses. And this is going to be the story of the whole year, where you're not drafting for 2023. You wanted him in last year. This year, you want Bijan. Yeah. This year, you want Brees. These are the we'll get into it later, which of those two you prefer.
Yeah.
But for now, I also wasn't drafting Achane and Gibbs because there were workhorses and some with similar profiles available a few rounds later, and I was like, what's the difference? I mean, the upside of Gibbs is you think maybe, possibly, or probably he is Alvin Kamara. Well, in that case, right? Yeah. In that case, which takes me back to Tony Pollard.
Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
The Tony Pollard and Spears conversation. If this guy's upside is Tony Pollard, you could just draft Tony Pollard. Yeah. If Gibbs' upside is Kamara, you could just draft Kamara, He's a lightly used race car as opposed to McCaffrey. The beauty of Kamara is over the years, coaches have resisted overusing him and giving all these carries to Mark Ingram. You remember. Awful.
Yeah.
But this also means that he's in his late 20s, but he can still play at a high level. He's just as efficient as he's ever been. This is great. Joe Mixon, they signed him because it's one last ride, one last job, right? This is probably the beginning of the end for Joe Mixon, but he's going to have a great year. And then anyone that drafts him next year is just going to be drafting for 2024 Joe Mixon, and they're going to be very disappointed when he breaks down. This is, again, tale as old as time. So there were some other round 3, round 4 running backs that I believe are going to be hits. Kenneth Walker, Rachaad White, just love him. And such a high floor with the receptions, but also has the ceiling because he is going to be the one getting the carries inside the 10. So he has touchdown upside, touchdown equity with all that target share. Of those 4 guys, right? Let's just say those 4 guys. Who did you draft the most? Who do you see scoring the most fantasy points this year?
So let me answer this question in multiple ways. Okay, so I have the most shares of Alvin Kamara, because I was in line with you, especially with all the reports coming out that, they were just not happy with Kenneth Miller. Obviously, he ended up on IR. But really what I loved, and I think a lot of just didn't get talked about, I don't know why we don't ever talk about offensive scheme changes, was them bringing in Kubiak, bringing in a new system, a system that probably fit Kamara's skill set a lot more. I think that, the old system was just so outdated, and it was so infuriating that watching them run in between the tackles with Kamara, without any creativity to the offense, any pre-snap motion, any outside zone concept. It was just so there was a reason to me why he was so inefficient last year. Not that Kamara is ever going to be a Nick Chubb type, but they just didn't use him correctly. So I love that they brought in, a new OC, and that to me was huge. But
getting him on the perimeter, Put your foot in the ground, make a cut, explode through the hole.
Yes,
these outside zone runs, they're the most efficient runs in football.
Yeah, absolutely. But the guy that I think is going to outscore or, potentially, kind of lead this group, and is a guy that I was just sort of kind of just really reaching for late in the draft season, was Kenneth Walker. And if you're somebody who believes in drum beats and you believe in sort of kind of, news and following beat reporters and what's coming out of camp, I mean, almost every report that kind of was coming from the Seattle camp had somehow alluded to Kenneth Walker being a bell cow, and then the icing on the cake, was DK Metcalf coming out and stating that, he told us early on that, this offense is going to go through the run game, and
you think it's Geno Smith? Yeah. Of course they're going to run Walker. Of course. This is why. I mean, sometimes I'm like, am I missing something? Because I was fading DK Metcalf. He was on my do not draft list. Because I was like, well, it's still Geno Smith, and this is the Kenneth Walker offense. So for all the same reasons, I'm not drafting Adonai Mitchell or any receiver not named Pittman on the Colts. Is because where do you think these targets going to come from? This is the Jonathan Taylor offense, right? This is the Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor show. There's not a lot of room for, anyone other than their number one receiver to produce.
Yeah.
This is just football 101. Football 101 tells you they got a lot of options at receiver in Seattle, and they got Geno Smith. And the player that, if you're Coach X and you're taking that job in Seattle, you're like, I think we're going to have to run this thing through Kenneth Walker. Isn't that what a football mind would do? Isn't that what a football guy would do? And so you just do that. You just draft Walker, and then maybe you can sprinkle in the least expensive receiver, but not the most expensive one. The guy whose air yards have been dropping every year. God.
Well, I'm in that camp because I was definitely drafting some DK. 4th round DK, but drafting some DK. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what how
did you draft DK over DJ Moore? No.
Yeah, actually, I did.
Did you draft him over Terry McLaurin?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, man. You should have talked. Should have talked to me about that.
Hey, we got a long season to go. We'll have to see.
We got a long season. We got a long season to go. No, there's gonna be a long season in Seattle with Geno Smith under center. That's right. Yeah. So Kenneth Walker has the abdominal strain. He said he's fine. I just don't see a guy like Kenneth Walker missing much time with anything in the upper body. I just see him toughing it out. I see him being one of those players that would play through a muscle tear in his upper body. He's going to say, just give me whatever it takes. Yeah. I'll go. That's why I'm not. It's hard for me to really imagine him missing time with an abdominal injury. I just can't do it.
Yeah, he can't. This is one of the few, though, backfields where, to me, the handcuff was very, very obvious and was also very, very affordable. So I don't handcuff a lot, but with the Kenneth Walker situation, Zach Charbonnet was usually going well into the double-digit rounds. So, hopefully, even if he does miss, you have the handcuff there ready, locked and loaded.
I love the waiver wire columns, the waiver wire advice, where they tell people to go out and pick up Zach Charbonnet, as if that's useful. I mean, as if anyone in this audience, can you please get in the chat and just explain why you were able to find Zach Charbonnet on your waiver wire? I don't believe it. I don't believe there's a single person in this audience who went to the waiver wire this week and was like, oh, look at Zach Charbonnet. I guess I'll pick him up. Like, what? How is he available? He's not available. Waiver wire, Zach Charbonnet. Out of here. I was having a hard time believing that Jalen Wright was available in leagues, but he is. And now we're seeing why. Now we're seeing, I still recommended though. You go and you put some fab down. I had a higher number, just so everybody knows. When I was thinking this through earlier this week, I had a higher fab number on Jalen Wright, and I brought it down for all the reasons we talked about.
Yeah.
All my Jeff Wilson fears and my realism about players like Jeff Wilson vis-a-vis Jalen Wright, I brought it down. I had it high. I was like, oh, you got to go get Jalen Wright, and I brought it all the way down to like 12%. I was like, nah, man.
This is what we want, though. This is like the perfect situation. This is what we want. Because Jalen Wright is not – we don't want Jalen Wright going nutso week 2, week 3, right? So to me, if this game plays out the way that we think it may play out, with Jeff Wilson taking a good majority of the touches, Devin A-Chain playing as well, Jalen Wright, if active, gets only a handful of touches, doesn't really do much. What is the community going to do? They're going to now assume that Jeff Wilson is the clear handcuff and the guy you want to own. So yes,
they're going to be wrong all the way through it. This is what you see.
Yeah.
You see so many of these fantasy analysts, they're wrong every way that you can be wrong.
Yeah.
They're bullish on Wright too early, and then they're bullish on Wilson too late.
Yeah.
It's like, hey man, no, you needed Wilson was a 1 week play.
Yeah.
It's Wilson Thursday Night Football against Buffalo. He has utility for a week if you need him, and then that's it. You're going to want Wright after that.
Yeah. And then when your league mates drop for Wright, and the price depresses, you go ahead and scoop them off waivers.
That's right.
And now you have them for when it matters.
Oh man.
So yeah, I'm loving the situation.
I mean, it would be nice because I have him to see like a 30-yard run.
Yeah.
But really what you're hoping for is like 3
nothing.
carries for 12 yards, no catches.
You want him inactive.
Is he going to be inactive?
Are
they going to bring back Ahmed or one of these guys that I don't even.
Would you be surprised?
If they activated Ahmed or so, I don't even know who's on the roster below.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Jeff Wilson, but it's always one of it's one of those guys.
Yeah, and
there's always a Salvon Ahmed lurking around.
Yeah, it's not easy to just bring someone up from the practice squad these days too, as well. So that is
they know the system, they know the playbook. It makes sense. It makes sense. It's probably not going to be right this week as much as I want it to be.
Yeah. I play fantasy football very much like the stock market. I want to give my guys when they're low in price, when their value is low. So any situation where it looks like a player's value is being depressed, I'm paying very, very close attention. And that's especially if it's a guy that I'm high on, but even if it's a guy I'm low on, I'm like, okay, now's the time for me to get because I could be wrong. So now's the time for me to grab a share. So, I love when these things happen, especially early on.
No, they also have a fullback. They also have Alec Ingold.
Yeah, they usually do a lot of things.
Yeah, they have guys. Oh man, it'll be fun to watch. It's gonna be fun to watch. Hopefully, it's just all passing game. That's what we hope. Passing game and A-Chan, and we'll all be happy.
Yeah.
So we talked about the dead zone. I have Brian Robinson Pollard teams. I have Aaron Jones, Najee Harris teams. I have these 0 RB teams, and they're looking great. And they're all looking great. So happy. But between Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, Brian Robinson, man, Brian Robinson's like a must start this week.
Yeah,
Najee, Pollard. You mentioned how much you love Pollard now, but moving forward, who do you think is going to be the most productive of those guys?
I think it's going to be Ramondre, but
really?
Before I get into that though, the great thing about doing the 0 RB thing is, do you ever feel comfortable going 0 RB and just grabbing 2 and say, okay, I'm done at RB? No, you grab 3, 4, 5 of them. So you look at your
Jaleel
0
McLaughlin.
RB team. Yeah, you look at your 0 RB
15
team
carries,
and you have
15 touches.
Yeah. So you have so many of these guys on your roster. So the great thing about it is I can look and play the matchups. So this past week, I set certain guys I set Mostert based on the matchup, and thank God. But and I decided to sit certain players, and I decided to play certain players based on the matchup. So I would sit Swift. Brian Robinson was a bit iffy, but going into week 2, Pollard plays the Jets. So if I have three or four guys to choose from, maybe Pollard sits on the bench, and someone like a Brian Robinson is a clear, easy start with that matchup.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of these situations, you can just play the matchup. Sometimes it's trying to figure out what's a run funnel defense, or what running back has a higher chance of producing, is a little bit easier than figuring out what wide receiver in a group in a trio type situation is gonna produce. So, but yeah, I do think Ramondre. I just think that they view him as a clear workhorse. He is involved in all situations, and I think that they are just going to lean on him because they want to win with defense. And I think their defense is it looks like it's gonna be, pretty good, pretty decent. They have a stuck cornerback. They have a defensive-minded head coach. Who knows? They're the Patriots. This could have just been, Bengals being the Bengals. But I think Ramondre, just volume alone, finally getting the passing down and the goal line work, he looks good. He looks good. I don't know. He looks good.
Better than Aaron Jones, though?
Well, my only issue with Aaron Jones, the only reason I don't say Aaron Jones, because we know the injury history, right? We know the injury history. I love Aaron Jones in that system.
Man, he's super tough. He's always played 15 games. Yeah, he misses a game or two.
Yeah. We'll see. It's
he's the closest by the numbers. He's the closest running back to Christian McCaffrey in terms of efficiency and play style and everything else. Guy's a stud. Aaron Jones is awesome.
I've always loved Aaron Jones, and I've always been pissed off about the utilization in Green Bay. I get you want to keep your guys healthy. I get it. And maybe that system, we know they're a little bit more conservative, when it comes to health and injury. So maybe they have their guys sit out one game extra more than they should be. But we all saw what he did in the playoffs against a very stout, those stout run defense. I mean, we saw what he did in the playoffs, it was at San Francisco that he just absolutely ripped through like tissue paper. So I'm an Aaron Jones fan, but I do think that he's a guy that's a little bit older, and I worry about the longevity with him. Whereas with Ramondre, definitely, granted, a worse offensive team. He's a little bit younger, a little bit more spry, a little bit more in a situation where I think that they're less worried about him getting injured, because I don't think that they really have, or thinking that they're making the playoffs.
Ramondre is not fast either, so that's really not an advantage for Ramondre. The thing,
you don't need to be fast.
What could bail you out on Ramondre over Aaron Jones is if Drake May is good.
Yeah.
See, that's what he has going for him. Aaron Jones is stuck with Darnold and we know what Darnold is. May could be interesting. May could be good. May could be better than Caleb Williams. It's very possible.
Could be.
I mean, he can't be worse based on what we saw in week 1. But I mean, Caleb will be better at some point. But that's the case. That was always the bull case for Ramondre Stevenson this year was, well, wait a second. You're telling yourself this story about Jalen Polk, and you're forgetting that the thing that would make Jalen Polk relevant would send Ramondre Stevenson like into the top 10 running backs.
Yep.
I mean, if Drake May is even serviceable, it's Ramondre Stevenson to the moon. I just happen to hold Aaron Jones in even higher regard. And, I don't like Brian Robinson, but you can't argue with the production. You can't argue with the guy that even in a situation where you weren't expecting him to produce much, they're in comeback mode last week, and yet you look up and you're like, this guy had 15-plus fantasy points. He just scores. He just produces. And now he's in an offense where they're not focused on him. They're focused on the quarterback. It's going to make it easier for him to have his most efficient season yet.
Absolutely. And I'm not a Cliff fan. Okay, we all know his offenses are they kind of. But one thing that he does do is his running backs do produce. And if you have followed Brian Robinson the last few years, he doesn't look like your prototypical back that can just really dominate in the receiving game, but he actually is very, very productive in the receiving game.
He
I've seen
is.
countless amounts of times where he'll take a screen pass or a dump off pass and go 30, 40, 60 yards with it. And I think
He's
he's
had a
very
season where he was the
savvy.
most efficient receiving running back in the NFL.
Yes, yes. I mean,
What?
he's
I
he's
looked
done it
at that
multiple
2 years
times.
ago. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. And I'm like, well, there's no
Yeah,
wonder they let Antonio Gibson go. They don't need him.
yeah.
They got
You
Brian
don't need him.
Robinson.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that is the best example
yeah.
of me just getting fooled by these running backs that come out of Alabama. They don't catch passes. They don't look like pass catchers. Josh Jacobs, same thing.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, they're out here catching 50 passes in the NFL, and you're like, how is this possible? This is crazy. I always think of the Alabama running backs as being system running backs, and then they exceed expectations in the NFL. But really, it's the receivers are system receivers because most of the receivers bust. But the running backs you can trust to produce. That's what's confusing about Alabama players. So when you look at the second round wide receivers that missed expectations in week one, a couple of them were not from Alabama. They were from Ohio State.
Wide receiver you.
Chris Olave. Marvin Harrison.
Oof.
Drake London.
Yeah.
Now, one of these guys is going to bust this year. One of those guys is going to bust.
Just one?
Well, who are you concerned about here in this group?
Oh, I'm definitely concerned about Marvin Harrison.
Oh, boy.
Absolutely concerned about Marvin Harrison. I don't really kind of lean too much on what we saw on film. I saw quite a bit on Twitter about kind of how fast he ran, and
he ran slow. No, they measured him. The next gen stats had him at like 16 miles per hour.
Yeah, I don't care.
But that's just because he didn't get to full speed. He had plenty of instances at Alabama where he ran at a top speed, and it was impressive.
Yeah.
He's not the slowest receiver in the league or anything like that. That's crazy. That's actually Keenan Allen. And Keenan Allen's great. Doesn't matter. That's the beauty of Keenan Allen. Doesn't matter. But
exactly.
But he and Kyler Murray are already on social media throwing shade. Yeah. This is not good, man.
At all.
This is not good.
At all. You can't you can't bite the hand that feeds you. You're a rookie coming in. And I'm not saying he's doing anything wrong. You do you, okay? But from my perspective, as someone who has you on some fantasy teams, okay, thank God I'm not overweight on this guy. Don't go.
I was going to say, I hope you're not overweight on him.
Oh God, no. But you need to be bringing coffee, bagels, cookies. I don't know whatever Kyler likes.
Right. Whatever.
Bring an Xbox. Sit down and play some game. Befriend Kyler. This is your money maker. And maybe we saw some hints of this, him not wanting to work out for teams, him not, showing up for the combine, him not wanting to sign up, to have his jersey, with the Fanatic. I mean, maybe we saw some of this. I don't want to say it's prima donna because this just may be smart business.
Well, this is beyond prima donna. He wouldn't even sign the contract himself. It was like a forged signature.
Yeah.
So what is happening? Allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah. And this is all hindsight. It's like, oh, we should have seen the signs, but no, I do not like it. Forget about the game. I can deal with just one target. What I cannot deal with is the aftermath. What I wanted to hear was, this is his first game. The coverage is kind of dictated that we go here, X, Y, Z, but we're going to make sure that he gets involved. He's a great player. just throw out the usuals. What I didn't want to hear was, it's not my job to get him the ball. That does not sound good, And the OC, I wasn't convinced that he was necessarily going to change that anytime soon. He's a rookie, so it's not as if he's in a situation where he can just sort of kind of pout and be upset and be angry about not getting the ball. He hasn't earned anything, And then you can't go out and drop your one target. Right now he's just got to he's got to figure something out. His dad played the game. I'm sure his dad at some point talk to him about, hey, this is what you want to do to your quarterback. This is how you want to treat your quarterback, with tender love and care.
Let me ask
I'm a little upset about that.
Let me ask you a question. Well, first of all, you shouldn't have drafted any of them. You could have faded him into oblivion. He was a rookie receiver.
Yeah.
I mean, early second round, banana in the tailpipe, rookie receiver in the second round. Jesus, I couldn't believe his ADP. It was ridiculous. So let me ask you a question. Where would Marvin Henderson Jr. have been drafted?
What do you mean?
If his name was not Harrison, okay, if he wasn't the Scion.
Yeah. Well, he was a number one pick. I mean, not a number one, but he was the first wide receiver taken. He was taken very early on in the draft.
Yes, my question is, if he were Marvin Henderson Jr. and he's skipping the combine and he's giving fake interviews, just saying, I'm not here to interview. I'm just preparing mentally for the 2024 season. I'm not here to answer any questions. Excuse me? We're NFL teams. We Marv, we don't have to draft you. Yeah. You have to sell yourself to us. It's the draft. How it works is you sell yourself to us. We don't sell ourselves to you. And then the goddamn Arizona Cardinals fell for it, and they took him. They took him anyway. They gave him nothing. They ducked every aspect of the process like I've never seen a player, and they just ate shit and took it and drafted him and pushed the button. And the embarrassing thing is, we've never had two other options that were better in Neighbors and Odunze. That's the crime of it, is that this team was really poised, and to blow the number 4 pick, it's difficult to come back from that, man. Yes, fortunately, they got a free pick out of it because of the trade back the previous year. So it's not like, it could have been viewed as a luxury pick, given that they had made a pretty smart trade down the previous year. Regardless, it's already based on what we're hearing and seeing in the box score and what we're hearing off the field. It's already a bad pick.
It's early.
Now it's
early. It's early. We got a long season to go.
No. It was a bad pick.
Yeah. I will say
because Neighbors was the better pick anyway.
Yeah. It did look like Buffalo dedicated, quite a bit of resources to trying to take Marvin Harrison out of the game. So I think that is significant. And even though that doesn't help us out from a fantasy standpoint, it does open things up for the other Cardinals players. But it's just a bad situation, And then you also have a quarterback who's not necessarily the greatest at reading defenses and, using all aspects of the field. So, hindsight, maybe he shouldn't have gone in the second round.
I didn't understand it. I am on record not understanding his ADP at all. And but fantasy gamers are guilty of the same biases the NFL teams are. This is Marvin Harrison Jr. This guy was the chosen one. He was productive at Ohio State. But as it turns out, with Jackson Smith and Jigba, if you play at Ohio State, you're going to be productive. Right? You're going up against Iowa and Minnesota and Purdue corners. This is what's going to happen. You're going to produce. It's going to be just fine. It's going to be just fine. I can tell you that I saw the ultimate Ohio State wide receiver specimen up close. Like I was on the sideline and watching him.
Mhm.
David Boston.
Oh, okay.
Do
Yeah.
you know that name?
Yeah, you remember David Boston. Yeah. Yeah.
David
Another
Boston.
Cardinals alum. Yeah.
Ohio State to the Cardinals
Yeah.
pipeline. That may
Yeah.
be. That's a trivia question. Maybe in the chat, let us know.
Yeah.
Is David Boston the last Ohio State receiver to play for the Cardinals? I'm curious. No one will ever be as jacked as David Boston at the wide receiver position.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
He
remember him
was
coming out.
a
Yeah.
bodybuilder,
He's
but
a
he was
beast.
also just enormous in
Yeah.
college as well. It was really cool. But cool name also. Marvin Harrison. The name gets you a long way, man. The
It
name
does.
it can get you. So my new nickname, because he skipped the process and I believe him to be slow, Marvin Harrison, I'm going to start calling him Marvin Treadwell Jr.
Oh, man. Oh, come
Yeah.
on.
I'm jumping
It's
right
early.
in. I'm
It's
jumping right in.
early.
I know it's early, but I see it. I see a lane.
Yeah.
I see a lane and I'm hitting the accelerator and I want to make sure
Yeah.
I'm in that lane very
Hey.
quick, very early. And is it an overreaction? Sure. And it's very late at night right now, and the people that are watching live, they know.
This is what they want.
They
They
know the
want
truth.
this.
They know the truth that I know that I am
Yeah.
not 100% behind this take
Yeah.
necessarily, but I do know it's the smart decision,
Yeah.
right? So this is a
It's
little
looking good
bit of
now.
a workshopped, like, political consultants have gotten in my ear here, and they've said, "Hey, Podfather, fade Marvin Harrison, fade him into oblivion, be first." Right? And if he has a good game, you could just pivot. And it's like, well, this is why I hire these consultants. That's why I give them the big bucks. They're probably right. I'm gonna do it. That's how I'm gonna lay the takeout. It's true. Yeah. So Marvin Harrison's the guy we're most worried about by far.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Absolutely.
turns out the guy that should have been drafted where Marvin Harrison was being drafted, and their ADPs actually just should have. If you just switched their ADPs, it would have made perfectly rational sense. It's Rashee Rice. If you put Rice situationally and his trajectory, it made sense that he would end up in the mid-second round.
I'm a huge. I just that was a guy that I just sort of I felt like I was on an island very early on in the off season, and I guess obviously he had the car incident, and then he questionable getting suspended, and then there was some other kind of negative news that came out. But even with all of that, if you heard anything from the beat writers, they just talked about how he was just absolutely like dominating camp, and we saw what he did last year. And we know the current state of the NFL where defenses really aren't letting you just to letting you and allowing you to, go deep all the time. So you really got to be able to attack that short intermediate. And that's something that him and Mahomes were working on since last year. And it seems like just one game in, they have really perfected that. And the best thing about him is his yak. I mean, on a team that has this much speed and this many weapons with that quarterback, it doesn't matter if it's a 3-yard pass, a 15-yard pass, a 25-yard pass. At any given moment, not Xavier Worthy or Mark, he himself has every opportunity to take it to the house. I love watching him after the catch. And then knowing that he's going to be the guy to get the volume to as well, being able to get like 8th, 9th, 10th round Rashee Rice shares like early in May was just, it was lovely. And he was still worse the rise in ADP all the way up to the second round, like you just said.
The NFL telegraphed what they were going to do with the suspension with
Yep.
all the previous suspensions in the last
Yep.
year. They've all waited, right? All the judgments have been postponed
Yep.
until law enforcement is able to weigh in, or that the legal system has fully processed the case. Then the NFL comes in, which is what I've been complaining about for 10 years with the NFL, just jumping in. And it made sense in some of these cases where they're like, okay, there was a defensive end for the Cowboys who threw his girlfriend on a bed of guns.
Yeah.
Greg Hardy.
Yeah.
Right? So there were situations where, we can go all the way back to Ray Caruth, where there were some real horrific tragedies that happened. Yeah. There was a tight end for the Patriots.
We all remember that situation.
Was a like I don't know exactly the definition of serial killer, but it was crazy. The whole thing, this amazing podcast. There's a whole Aaron Hernandez podcast out, which is mind blowing. The whole thing. So the NFL, it was every year. It was Ray Rice. It was something else caught on camera. It was something, kicking a girlfriend. It was crazy. Remember Joe Mixon punched a girl in line at a restaurant
at Oklahoma. Yeah.
This was we talked about. You mentioned Kareem Hunt earlier in a hotel, elevator, and then somehow, some way, things have improved dramatically. Where now it's like player X was speeding, right? That's majority. Now, again, there was also the case of the drag racing where someone was killed, right? And then actually, Henry Ruggs, was another drag racer, right? So I still get the sense that the volume of the cases is going down, and that has given the NFL the license to say, okay, we're not going to be as uber judgmental, and we're not going to make these snap decisions based on partial information. Because I also think that it was reactionary, and then they had these instances they had to roll it back where the players challenged the ruling, and then new information comes to light, and then a confession gets recanted, or video actually comes out that exonerates the player. And they're like, okay, enough. We cannot just jump to conclusions and do these insta suspensions anymore. And, thankfully, again, the volume of crimes that is happening is starting to diminish. Finally, we can get away with just saying, we'll wait until the judge has rendered a ruling, and then we'll hand down the suspension. But this was a known approach for the NFL a year ago. And so this idea that Rashee Rice would be suspended this year never made sense to me. I was like, what? How? 6th, 7th round Rashee Rice? What?
Yeah. And it's a situation too, once Twitter gets a hold of something, especially if that something is a negative, it's going to snowball. And there's always, it's not just that it affects this one player, it starts to affect everyone else. So what did you see? You saw, think about it now. Think about the last draft that happened, that Saturday before, the first week of the NFL, and what the ADP looked like. And then just, rewind to maybe even just about a month ago, before Marquise Brown got hurt. Marquise Brown was going as the highest owned Kansas City Chief wide receiver, and I think maybe even Xavier Worthy was following him. And then it was Rashee Rice at one point. So it's just kind of interesting to see how one bit of negative news can really affect everything. And sometimes, we don't necessarily really do a good job of being very analytical with it. But I'm with you. There was precedence there. It didn't seem like he did anything overly egregious. Okay. So it's one of those situations. I think I'm a gambler type drafter. Means I'll gamble on injuries. I'll gamble on things like this, but gambling like most people gamble with as much information as I can, trying to make an informed decision. And I felt like this was a good gamble to make.
We have a bunch of second-year players who have really sent smoke signals up into the sky telling the world that they stink. And that Dynasty gamers, in particular, Dynasty leaguers, that, this is a guy you might want to consider dropping at some point where the Dynasty value goes to 0. And I posted on Twitter, I said, hey, these 5 guys, they're in trouble in Dynasty. I mean, we gave him a year, said you got to develop, but then week 1 we want to see some things. We want to see some snaps. We want to see some targets. We want to see some production. And then we get these replies on Twitter, these buzzards like, I can't believe you even had this guy on your team. This guy never had any value. No. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He did. Marvin Mims had value. Jalen Hyatt had value. I got Jalen Hyatt going to 0. I got Luke Musgrave going to 0. I got Marvin Mims going to 0. I got Demario Douglas going to 0. I got Roschon Johnson potentially going to 0. This where all these guys are headed in Dynasty. Now, I'm going to continue to truther for Roschon Johnson and Luke Musgrave. What about you? What are these guys that, had high hopes and then dudded out in week 1 where it's like, okay, I guess my hopium has run its course.
Yeah,
any of these guys you're truthering for?
I was a Marvin Mims truther.
Okay.
But I kind of knew halfway through the drafting season that it was not going to pan out. Mm-hmm. When I started hearing names like Ville, I started seeing signings like Josh Reynolds, started seeing, Tim Patrick running with the ones. You were kind of getting sense that even with the Jerry Jeudy trade, even with this path opening up, that things weren't just going to fall in lines, And this is a guy that, like, I really was very, very high coming out on, very high on last year, just held shares all the way through. There are very few guys who do not produce that I will hold shares all the way through. Did it with him. And starting this season, I felt like, okay, this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year. But it didn't take very long. And the preseason game in usage was the nail in the coffin. So seeing him come out that first week, really being that unproductive in that type of scenario, really not getting the looks, and seeing other guys sort of kind of, advance him is concerning. Now, kind of like you with Roschon, if I was in Dynasty, again, he's at the very bottom of that list. He's just right about to get cut. He is some guy that he's going to be on the watch list. He's going to be on that watch list where
you like
any little bit of sign or a change in head coach, a change in teams. Okay, I'll buy back in for a little bit. Just see what you do. So
that's going to be it's going to be a wasted roster spot. You're better off putting any running back in there, really, in Dynasty, just hoping that something happens. A Jeff Wilson type. Yeah. That's the thing, is that there is a cost. There is a cost to this roster bloat and these clogged up, taxi squads with these receivers that are never going to do a goddamn thing. We agree. Jalen Hyatt was never going to do a goddamn thing.
No, yeah.
Jalen Hyatt was always going to. He was a slow field stretcher. That guy never has a role in the NFL. So here's the thing. My favorite comps are ones where the guy has a former player from his alma mater that we can comp to directly. That's my favorite. My favorite for Marvin Mims, the comp to go to, is D.D. Westbrook. I mean, this is a D.D. Westbrook situation.
But even D.D. Westbrook had a year or so. Even he had 1 year where he was useful.
He was useful. Yes, I think Marvin Mims could be useful at some point, but I think it's a great comp. I think it's a great comp. Of all the guys I mentioned, I do still believe that Demario Douglas will have weeks, especially if Drake May is under center and he exceeds expectations. I do think Demario Douglas is good. I think he was a great value. It was just a super pick out of Liberty by the Patriots. I'm not overly concerned that he didn't get a lot of targets in week 1. I thought they got out to a lead and they're like, we're going to run Ramadre and run the clock out, and that's it. So I'm not worried about Demario Douglas as much as the other guys. One guy I think that has the underrated loss of dynasty value from week 1, who was in his second year, that I'm really worried about, that I am selling low on, is Jordan Addison. Because I don't think he's going to play this week, and I think this is going to be a nagging ankle situation. Guy's like 160 pounds and with perpetually injured ankles, and he's on a team where Sam Darnold is the quarterback, and Sam Darnold is going to be locking in on Justin Jefferson all year, and then next year it's going to be J.J. McCarthy maybe. There just isn't a path for Jordan Addison, and then he has, all these different interactions with law enforcement where he can't stop speeding or falling asleep behind the wheel. I'm so out on Jordan Addison. I'll never draft him again.
Yeah, he's been a guy that those types of situations where you're a 2 or a 3, and in my mind, he's a 3, in my book, because I do think at some point Hockenson will come back and will take over that number 2 role. So at the very least, he's a 3, and you've heard nothing but great things about Naylor throughout camp.
Hey, JP in the chat. Jalen Hyatt was a receiver people liked. People thought he was going to be the number 1 in New York. This is a thing that happened.
He was drafted in the second round
to take over as the number 1 receiver in New York. People loved Jalen Hyatt. There were people on Twitter that had him ranked like their top 5 receiver in the class.
This is true.
This is true.
This was like literally last year.
Literally a year ago. What do you mean? Everyone's like, he never had any value. Yes, he did.
That's the fun thing about fantasy. Is like we forget like that. We forget. But,
memory hole it. He did actually.
Because the thing with a player like Jordan Addison in this type of system is, and again, systems can always change, but when are you ever going to feel comfortable starting him? I don't want to start guys where I'm throwing a dart, or in the dark, or trying to guess if he's going to be productive this week. That's never a fun game to play. So I try to avoid those situations as much as possible. And it's 2024. There are just too many situations out there where you have wide receivers, even potential third option on a team that are going to likely give you week-to-week production and give you upside. Look at the Houston Texans are a perfect example of that. Give me any of their wide receivers, obviously, over a Jordan Addison. So guys like that, I just try to avoid. If I'm in a draft, that period or that range in the draft, I'm looking elsewhere. That's kind of what I'm doing.
Thank you. The chat has an amazing memory like an elephant in the chat. Theo and I did draft Jordan Addison in the Kings Classic auction draft, but it was one of those situations where we just assumed, based on where Jackson Smith and Jigba and others had closed the bidding, we weren't going to get him. I think we just put a $7 bid out there at some point, or $6 bid, just to expedite the bidding on players we didn't want, and then no one else bid and we got him. We didn't really want him. Okay? That happens in auctions. I've had players in auctions that I would never have otherwise, and I don't even know how the hell I ended up with that guy. Right? I think in that same draft, we also got Jahmyr Gibbs. And I was like, how did that happen? Right? We ended up, I was like, okay. So, yes, the auctions are, a format unto themselves, and weird stuff happens. Like you end up with Jordan Addison, and congratulations, you never know when you can start him, and it's hell. It's hell.
Yeah.
Now I have 10 burning questions for you. 10 burning questions, and actually, because there's another receiver who's in his second year, who's face planting, that I didn't even mention yet. There's a lot of face planting second-year wide receivers. There's a lot of face-planting wide receivers across the board.
Yeah.
But but my first question is tied to this receiver, and then it ties back to his quarterback, and it's all coming up after this. Say what you want about fantasy football. You can't say it's not a game of skill. My favorite game of skill during the NFL season, these underdog pick'em contests. You pick 6, you can win 100x your payout. Just pick a game, one game, just one game. Stack that game. Think week 1, Vikings-Giants. Joe Schoen, he doesn't know what he's doing. I watched Hard Knocks. Daniel Jones is what we thought he was. Less than on Daniel Jones. Less than on Malik Neighbors. Less than on Devin Singletary. And Sam Darnold, better than advertised. Sam Darnold, more than. Justin Jefferson, more than. Aaron Jones, more than. Boom, 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 boom. 100 extra payout on Underdog right now. Use promo code Underworld. You get a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've raised the maximum bonus from $100 to $125. You put in $250, you get $125 in bonus cash. Who doesn't love that with promo code Underworld? Now go start picking. That's real speed. Just so you know. That's not sped up. That's not 1.25, 1.5. That's just me laying down a promo at real, actual speed.
Impressive.
I mean,
impressive.
I couldn't believe it just now. I was like, did I speed up the tape?
Yeah, I think you just got your energy during promo.
I was in the groove, man. Sometimes you're just feeling it. Sometimes you're just feeling it, and you can rock it. Now, the wide receiver that they've mentioned in the chat, which we forgot, was Jonathan Mingo, because admittedly, I always forget about Jonathan Mingo. I always forget he's even in the league.
Yeah.
Because I was also at the Senior Bowl, and he was forgettable because he couldn't separate. And then I remember when he was in the SEC, he couldn't separate. Maybe if he was at Ohio State, he would have had 1,500 yards, and his name was Harrison. But no, he was on the SEC schedule, and that's harder, much harder, right? Just ask Malik Neighbors, right? I still can't believe it. It still burns me that how Malik Neighbors forever, he's going to be looking at that draft and being like, I can't believe they took Harrison over. I'm so insulted. But this is the biases that we deal with. And then Odunze too. Oh, Odunze. Oh man, that guy's a sports car. Love him. My comp for Bryce Young is Todd Marinovich.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. So this is great. This is good. So Todd Marinovich was a top draft pick once upon a time by the, I believe, then Los Angeles Raiders. He was a Raiders pick. It could have been Los Angeles, I think, maybe Oakland, but probably Los Angeles. And he was famous for that his father put him through a very rigorous mental acuity training system to get him prepared to play in the NFL. And what ultimately happened was he was so protected and he was so trained in like laboratory conditions that when he actually got on an NFL football field, he crumbled. He crumbled in the real world environment of football. But it was enough. The whole mythology around him and his father and the system and was enough to get him drafted really high. And that's exactly what happened with Bryce Young.
Yeah, I didn't understand the Bryce Young pick, but like you said, we live in a vacuum chamber of information. Information's a two-way street.
Went to
it
Alabama.
Can be useful, It can be useful, or it can like really take you to a place where you would have never have thought you would have been, and have you convinced that somehow this guy, Bryce Young. I mean, how many pictures did we see of Bryce Young next to like other NFL players? But we were convinced that this guy was the consensus and overall number one pick,
over CJ Stroud, who was just better in every way with similar production.
Yeah.
Did you ever see my Bryce Young impression? Did you ever see that? Here,
No.
I'll do it right now. You ready? You ready?
Oh, come on now. Oh, man.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? We learned our lesson with Baker Mayfield, I thought.
We didn't. I at least had hope that he was gonna, improve a bit, with the quarterback whisper, but didn't happen.
Oh yes, the quarterback whisper. Those always work. So what do we do? Deontay, Chuba, eventually Jonathan Brooks. What are we doing? What do we do with these guys?
Can they bench him? Can they? I mean, you think they can get away with benching Bryce?
I don't know. I mean, the thesis around Deontay Johnson was like this was the best skill match you're going to find for a guy like Bryce Young.
Yes. And in a blowout loss, in a negative game script situation, he did nothing.
It was bad, man.
It was very bad. And
very bad.
Deontay was one of my favorite people to draft because of how late you were able to get him and how many potential targets he has. I mean, I don't want to use the one-on-one analogy of, Adam Thielen, Bryce Young, connection 2023, but come on.
I still think he's a buy low. I think that if there's one player who will still produce in this offense, it's going to be Deontay Johnson. I can tell you what thing I'm worried about the most is the running game. Chuba, that terrifies me. And then Jonathan Brooks is going to come into a situation where there's Chuba there and Miles Sanders, and they can't score. I mean, I was saying all offseason that I didn't understand. There's a lot I didn't understand. I didn't understand the Marvin Harrison ADP. I didn't understand a lot of ADPs. Another ADP I didn't understand was the Jonathan Brooks ADP. And I was like, let me get this straight. Jonathan Brooks is going ahead of Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford's going to start until further notice, Chubb returning and regaining the job. But until then, we get Jerome Ford as a bell cow, and I'm drafting a guy that might come back at some point and be a rotational player, still rehabbing a knee injury on the Carolina Panthers. What are we doing?
I was buying, and I am still buying Jonathan Brooks. Still buying. Still what do you mean? Going to
You're trading for him?
I will trade for him. I will acquire shares. He goes at that sweet spot where I'm drafting him, it's not going to hurt me. If he fails, he fails, no one's going to say,
put him on your IR. I understand the thesis, but you're going to need that IR spot pretty soon.
Maybe. I told you I'm a gambler. I told you I'm like a risky player. I don't just play high stakes. I am a high risk player. And, I'm a UT alum as well. So I got to see Jonathan Brooks week in and week out. Is he Bijan? No. But he does a lot of things and a lot of things well. So you brought up the Rachaad White love as far as touches and what he can do at the goal line and the passing. That's to me, Jonathan Brooks is a souped up version of Rachaad White. You can get the volume potentially, but he's also more athletic.
I'll be all in on him in 2025, Abib.
Say what?
I'll be all in on him in 2025 when he's healthy and the team is better.
Yeah. So he's definitely, he's definitely someone you'll have to like wait on. I try, when it comes to some of these, injuries, ACL tears, the technology has improved. So theoretically, like we have seen, not theoretically, really like per the research, per the studies, we've seen shorter recoveries, but everyone's different. I would have liked to have seen him be ready to start the season. So already win in your book. Carolina Panthers looking this bad, win in your book. But it is a new offense. It is a new system, okay? So it is one that I think, can evolve. I like the fact that Chuba and Miles Sanders are struggling right now, because I think that when Jonathan Brooks comes back, he's easing into an easier situation. Hopefully by that point, Deontay has been able to open things up a little bit more for him. But
My
you can thrive
face
in
is
bad
contorting.
situations.
The logic leaps and contorting
Yeah.
of facts that you had to do to try to try to
All,
get to try
all I need is volume. All I need is
shoehorn
volume.
our way into some
Yeah.
case for
Simplify it.
Jonathan Brooks. It was very good. It was a good try.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
simplify it.
the
If he comes
law,
back to volume.
medicine, you're clearly a smart guy. You could have gone into a lot of different areas. I'm just going to keep my hand the same. I'm not going to switch any cards out. I'm not drafting Jonathan Brooks this year, and I'm good with it.
Yeah.
But I you agree, though. This is a buy low opportunity on Deontay Johnson.
Yes, that I agree.
You agree? Okay, this is what we agree on.
I'm still in on Deontay. Still on Deontay.
Yeah, still on Deontay, yes.
Yeah.
My thing is, teams like Carolina, I have this rule where I just pick one guy, and I'm only allowed to draft really one guy from that team. In this case, it was Deontay and Chuba. I allowed myself to indulge on two only when Jerome Ford was unavailable. Because I was in situations where in some of these expert drafts, when you go really hard 0 RB, you can get squeezed.
Yeah.
And so you get squeezed, and I've had many anecdotes where I talked about getting squeezed, and like the fact that the league allows you to take Jerome Ford is like the greatest gift. Like you're on your knees thanking everybody. Like otherwise you had no one to start week one. Hey, Jaleel McLaughlin did get the 15 touches, for my week one squad. So I was very happy with that because of the extreme 0 RB. Whatever. There are certain teams where at most there's going to be 2 guys that you might draft just because there's no goddamn fantasy points getting scored in Carolina. So you can just pivot somewhere else. And then there are places where, hey, there's going to be quite a few fantasy points scored here, and it's underappreciated, like a place like Tampa. Now we look up, and who's the streamer of the week? It's Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield's back, baby. Is it possible that he's just not that bad? Maybe he's just the number one pick. Finally, he's maturing. Right? Remember he was doing this whole thing where he was calling services to meet him in parking lots with a van. Remember he had a van?
Yeah.
He had a special van that he would go and park in parking lots, and women of the night would meet up with him in his van. Do you remember this was a thing? Am I making this up?
I didn't. I had no wind of this, but I'm not surprised.
I think he had this whole thing where he was meeting women in parking lots with a van.
Yeah.
Fact check me in the chat with that.
Not
My
surprised. My
larger point is, I think that he was distracted.
Yeah.
During his time in Cleveland, and now he's decided that okay, I actually think I can do this. I think I can be a professional in the league and be a starter and be successful. And it's helpful if I have Rashad White over here and Mike Evans over there and a healthy Chris Godwin. That was a tough decision for me, was the Godwin versus Deontay, because the case was strong for both this year.
Yeah. And those are like 2 of my favorite wide receivers to draft. I remember kind of I did rankings for the first time this year, early on. And those guys I just had so far and away above where they were going in ADP. And it was almost, I try, I'm a greedy drafter where I try to like catch the ADP value. So I know that I have these guys higher ranked, but they go 2 to 3 rounds later. Let me see if I can load up on players and then still get my guy. But I'm 100% in agreement with you. And that kind of point, as far as, I'm going to limit myself to 1 to 2 players on these teams that don't score a lot of points. And then I'm going to attack teams that score a lot of points. Sometimes the game is that simple and we lose sight of that, The game can really be that simple. just draft players on good teams, and then
or good draft players on teams where they're the only option. Like, remember when Dotson got traded?
Yep.
And you're at the FFPC, you're drafted in high stakes, and you're like, why is McLaurin's ADP not moving? This is weird.
Exactly. And so I think those are like ideal situations. And then I personally like to never take a team off my board, because every year there are teams that surprise. So I think the idea of at least getting 1 to 2 is a great way to look at it. Because if you remember last year, that team was the Houston Texans.
Bingo.
And if you just
the Patriots,
1 to 2
Ramadre,
pieces,
look at Ramadre. I think Pop Douglas is gonna be heard from again. And there's almost always a player on every team that you can justify drafting at ADP.
Yeah.
Look at the 0 RB landscape. Just look how teed up these 0 RB teams are, and look at what's happened to the early round running backs. Now, we know Achane's going to play. It's clear he's going to play. He was ultra efficient in the passing game, and which is just incredible news. If you drafted Achane, I mean, congratulations. It's looking like a win. But still, he did come away from week 1 with an injury. McCaffrey didn't play in week 1. Jonathan Taylor dudded out in a game that many thought he would produce. ETN was, rotated 50-50 with Tank Bigsby, at least with the carries, right? Either way, he produced at a mid-level production, very similar to second half ETN, not like first half ETN from last year. Jahmyr Gibbs was used as a satellite back only. Derrick Henry was scripted off the field. Kyron Williams was cartoonishly inefficient. He was. I think I posted his yards per touch on Twitter X. It was like 2. Something very low. You just look around, look at these, and the 3rd and 4th round running backs like Kenneth Walker and Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara were better than the running backs drafted earlier than them. And then the running backs drafted rounds later than that were just as productive, if not better, more productive. It was amazing. So I've never seen the board fall this well for 0 RB in my life.
Yeah, now all we need is better QB play. And then boom, this is it. I think a lot of us
we need neighbors, right? We need some neighbors.
Yeah.
We need Daniel Jones to take his head out of his ass, or switch it out. Put in Tyrod Taylor. I don't care. Get neighbors the football. So we need more neighbors. That's for sure. That's what I need, and we need Amon-Ra.
Yeah.
Right. These are things that I need in week 2 to make sure that my teams continue to win.
Yeah, I think it's coming. I think there's 2 things with that week 1, and we see it every year where it's, all hell breaks loose, chaos ensues, and everybody's panicking. And our number 1 overall pick is, threw up a dud, and this random guy's, exploding. I think there's 2 things. One, and a lot of people have talked about this, is just like teams really aren't prepping the way that they used to. They aren't playing preseason games. Guys are holding out. There's a lot more movement around the NFL, but teams aren't playing in actual preseason games. And the ones that do surprisingly come out and they actually look prepared. Kansas City Chiefs they won the championship. This is the blueprint. They've won multiple championships, and they play their guys in the preseason. And guess what? They come out hitting on all cylinders. The other thing I think that you got to kind of account for is that this first game, teams have more time than ever, or than they will at any point in the season, to prep and to game plan. And certain coaches are just better at this than others. And so, you watch certain games and you get surprised and by some of the outputs. Amon-Ra, for instance, it was very clear the Rams said, this guy is not going to beat us. Jamison Williams, you're up. Let's see what you can do. Credit to him, he showed up. But I don't know how many teams will have the amount of time to be able to game plan like that and take out an Amon-Ra. And then if you do, the one good thing is that when they took him out, other players were able to hold serve or able to show out. So now you put Jamison Williams' speed on tape multiple times. So do you want to deal with the short and intermediate Amon-Ra, or do you want to have to deal with Jamison Williams breaking off 60, 70? So I think it's a good thing for him long term. But Mark Andrews, same thing. I mean, and if you look back historically, Spagnuolo always takes out Mark Andrews. And he's just a great defensive mind in general. He is such an underappreciated coordinator, but he took out Mark Andrews. He took him out. Like, he double bracketed him. He made sure that he was not going to beat them. So I think we could see a lot of shifts, but as we get kind of, into the season, teams just don't have the time. They don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the energy to be able to take out our favorite fantasy players.
So who are you more worried about? It sounds like you might not be as worried about Andrews as some other people are. Are you more worried about Andrews? Are you more worried about Kelsey? Or are you more worried about Kincaid?
I'm more worried about Kincaid. I think, I'm more worried about Kincaid, to be quite honest. I think Kincaid will have his games, but I don't think that they need Kincaid. I wasn't a Keon Coleman fan, but they utilized Keon Coleman. I'm not a huge Curtis Samuel fan, but Curtis Samuel's good. I'm not a huge Khalil Shakir fan, but Khalil Shakir is good. So I think we anointed Kincaid, of being Josh Allen.
I'm kind of a Shakir fan, I think.
Say what?
I think I'm a Shakir fan. I like Shakir.
Yeah, when I say I'm not a fan, meaning like I'm not beating the drum for him. Like, I think that's what I'm saying. I think he's good, which is why I think Kincaid, this idea that Kincaid is just, he's for sure they're like top wide, he may end up, leading in targets, but where he was going, I think it was more of, I would have at least wanted to have seen evidence of that in the past, or have more assurance that for sure he's going to be on a week-to-week basis leading his team in targets. And so I'm less worried about Kelsey, because I feel like even though he's slowing down, even though he's having issues, I still feel like he's going to be productive. Is he going to be the Kelsey of old? No, but I still feel like he's going to be productive.
You've seen pictures of him, right?
I've seen pictures of him. I understand that, the Taylor Swift and, maybe he's, I get all that.
I don't think he's working out anymore, dude.
Patrick Mahomes. Say what?
I think he stopped working out.
You think he stopped working? You think so?
I don't know what he's doing. He looks like me. It's crazy.
Yeah. Hey,
what are you doing?
It only takes a couple games. It only takes a couple games. I think he'll get there. I think he'll get there.
Yeah, I'm concerned about Kelsey. I really am. Andrews, I think the concern is that likely he's also very good.
Yeah. But the good thing about that situation
plays like a wide receiver.
Yeah, the good thing about that is I think that there's room for both. I think that there's room for both, and when there are a lot of great individuals who can break down the game in ways that I cannot. But one thing that I really kind of gravitated to, and that made a lot of sense, and why I'm not panicking on Mark Andrews, is the types of route that they run. And I think if you blinded yourself from the production, and you said tight end A is going to run short, flat routes and be kind of a safety valve when needed, and tight end B is going to run intermediate and deep routes, and in areas where I think we all would prefer our tight, you'd probably gravitate towards tight end B, and that's kind of what played out. It just, again, I think it's a byproduct of the Chiefs' defense, their plan going into the game, and again, this Ravens O-line just really, having some issues against that Chiefs front. So we'll see. Hopefully the O-line, improves, but we'll see. There's a lot of moving parts. That's the great thing about the NFL. This is why I love the sport, to be quite honest.
Well, the tight end position really struggled.
Yeah.
I mean, an epic implosion of a single position in a single week.
Yeah.
We've never seen. I mean, it was Isaiah Likely was the only producer all week at the position. Yeah. That's just weird. It's very bizarre. And I think that this incredible emphasis on edge rushers, but and loading up with like 3 edge rushers at a time.
Yeah.
And you've seen these teams in the NFL draft. I've noticed this, like they just have an insatiable appetite for these edge rushers.
Yeah.
Like even if you're watching Hard Knocks, they talked about how they traded up, right, in the 5th round to get this edge rusher. I can't remember his name, but he's awesome, right, and so disruptive, and it just makes sense. Like the offensive lineman can no longer contain these guys, and there needs to be more help coming over from the tight end position because the quarterback is under such duress. So that makes sense to me that one of the shifts in the NFL is that the tight ends have to stay in and block a little bit more, just because the wicked athleticism that's now on the edge around the NFL. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, and kind of going back to the previous point, like you're going to load up on edge rushers and these fast, athletic defensive linemen. So what are teams doing now, or what are teams having success doing? Running the ball.
They got to do it.
So, if we can, I think those things all kind of play with each other, and you're all able to kind of make sense of it and see why Joe Mixon was able to do what he was able to do, or why certain running backs were able to run the ball, and then also see why passing game or passing numbers were down. This all makes sense. That is the beauty of the game. When you can sort of kind of piece together these, all of these different analytical, data points or these takes, and marry it with the film, and takes that and then try and figure out, okay, what is going to happen in week 2 now? How are teams going to react? Is this real? Is this just, kind of an isolated event? That is the fun of it all. And that's what makes it so hard. And that's why it's so difficult to guess and know for sure, or be, any percentage degree of accurate on what week 2 is going to look like, what week 3 is going to look like. That's not even accounting for injuries. So yeah, love it. It's like 8-dimensional chess we're playing.
Austin Booker.
Yeah.
Austin Booker is the edge rusher from Kansas, and he just wasn't that athletic, 25th percentile speed score. That's why he went in the 5th round. But technique-wise and just the intangibles off the charts, him with Sweat, this is what teams are doing now.
Yeah.
And this is why you shouldn't be investing major capital in your fantasy drafts, even in tight end premium, on the tight end position. Look what happened in week 1. This is what we preach. This is not the position to invest in. You can make it work with even if the guy you tried to make it work with, like a Jonnu Smith, didn't necessarily produce in week 1. That's still better than taking a bagel from a Kincaid or a Kelsey or an Andrews or on down the list. Pitts bailed everybody out with a touchdown. He was one of the few that even got a touchdown. The anemic production of the tight end position was historic in week 1. It was crazy. It was crazy bad. Crazy bad. I do like Kincaid. I still believe in him. He was a first-round pick when there were a bunch of other tight ends like, I don't know, the starting tight end for the Lions, who was the most productive tight end in the league last year. So he was drafted before them, right? He was drafted before Michael Mayer and all these guys. He was the guy. And the issue with Dalton Kincaid is he didn't test. So we really don't know how athletic he is. And he's not that seam crushing Mark Andrews type. If I'm running an actual NFL team, you're right. That's the guy that's a difference maker. The guy that can really cruise down the seam and occupy those safeties in the deeper quadrants. That is an incredible luxury to have a Mark Andrews on your team. It absolutely is. And that's why you got to look at target depth when you're evaluating tight ends. And for most of the season last year, Kincaid was used very close to the line of scrimmage. That was the one thing on the Kincaid profile, the stat profile, and the advanced metrics profile on Player Profiler from 2023 that concerned me about Kincaid, but I was overwhelmed by the fact that the whole season was teeing up for him to be the target leader, where they let Diggs go, all those vacated targets, and they didn't replace him with anyone other than a rookie and Curtis Samuel. So that thesis won the day for me, even though I knew in a vacuum he's not that seam smasher that Mark Andrews is.
Yeah. And you can't, I mean, I have Kincaid shares because of that very, logic and thought process.
You had to.
You have to. I mean,
I have more. Did you have more Kincaid shares or Laporta shares?
I have more Kincaid shares, and it's not close.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay.
It's not close.
As long as it's not close. Okay.
It's not close. It's not even close. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Laporta was a little banana in the tailpipe there. With Laporta.
Yeah.
I mean, just a little too rookie flash for me. Right? A little too much flash paper.
Yeah. Agreed.
Breece Hall, or Bijan Robinson. Who you got? Let's come out with it.
Week 1 or week? This is preseason.
Rest of the season. Rest of the season. Who you got? Who's gonna score more fantasy points? Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson.
Breece Hall.
Why?
And it had solely because of the quarterback play. After watching Kirk Cousins week 1, I have so little confidence in this offense unless Michael Penix takes over. You cannot be, I don't want to call it one-dimensional, but eliminating play action altogether. I mean, this type of offense, the whole reason we bought into this Atlanta offense, because we were bringing over the McVay system, right? And so how do we eliminate, rolling out and play action pass and, getting the defense moving one way? How do we eliminate that and then go to this situation where our quarterback is so immobile that he has to get the ball out in 2 to 3 seconds? So, yeah, Bijan's going to catch a lot of passes, but if you cap the upside of the entire offense, it's going to hurt your TD upside, and it's going to make it difficult for you to really be that overall RB1. Whereas with Breece, after watching him this past week, the snap percentage was just absolutely ridiculous and insane. He was involved in all aspects of the game, run game, obviously, in the passing game, and all he really needs is TDs. This is a fantasy dream, the Jets, with this consolidated, passing tree, this narrow target tree. I'm eliminating kind of, a lot of the fourth quarter because the game's out of reach. Aaron Rodgers is sitting, you get a lot of kind of garbage time, Lazard TDs, and you got the one busted play obviously with Lazard. But for the most part, this offense is clearly going to run through Breece and it's going to run through Garrett Wilson, and I love that. So, drafting wise, I was kind of taking both. I think I had started off on Breece, and then I kind of moved to Bijan, and then I kind of ended up on Breece. I have more Breece than Bijan, at this current point in time. But if I had to pick today, to me it's Breece, and that margin is a lot larger after watching Kirk Cousins play.
The opportunity share breakdown for Bijan Robinson versus Tyler Algier was just music.
Yeah.
Just music. It's exactly what we wanted to see. It was best case scenario.
Yeah.
So that is one of those like silver linings from an awful game where it's like, oh, the opportunity share skewed heavily to Bijan.
Yeah.
Heavily. If anything, Braylon Allen's going to start to chip away, start to get some more touches as he earns them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not going to happen with Algier. Last year was the year that Algier was going to be the one that would be, taking some of those veteran carries away from the rookie. But now it's going to be all Bijan, baby.
Yeah.
Get ready. So I'll take Bijan, you'll take Breece, and we'll see what happens.
All right.
These rookie wide receivers, you mentioned Keon Coleman. Have they been exceeding your expectations so far in week 1? Other than Marvin Harrison. We know Marvin Harrison's a dud. He's a bust. He's Marvin Treadwell Jr. Other than Marvin Treadwell Jr., the good rookies, most of the other ones, look pretty good. You agree?
Yeah, I wouldn't say exceeding expectations just because obviously the production wasn't there for the majority of them. Unfortunately, we saw Rome kind of come down with the injury as well. But I did like.
I didn't have very high expectations at all for them in week 1.
Yeah. I think with Neighbors, he looked good. There was no concern of him passing an eye test. Okay.
No, that's right. He passed the eye test.
So I think he's a guy that I knew going into the season. I drafted him. I reached for him. He was just going to be a fixture in my lineup. Yep. He's one of the few guys that I'm not going to be looking at on a week-to-week basis. Is he productive? Should I sit him? He is just in the lineup, and he's just there.
Neighbors.
That lineup position is already locked.
Lock him in.
It's locked him in unless I see the red O, it's locked in. So Keon Coleman was a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
I actually started off drafting him quite a bit because he was going in the 8th round. And, again, that kind of contrarian mindset. Hey, everybody's high on these other rookies. Let me kind of gravitate. Who knows? We've already talked about this sort of kind of, the vacated targets. Significant amount of vacated targets. So who knows? Let's roll the dice that he's the guy, And so I kind of like what I saw. And I also like that he's a big body. I like that he could potentially be a red zone weapon. So seeing, kind of him being productive and earn the target share in that first game, I think is a huge plus for him because I think he was a big question mark. You had Ladd McConkey. I'm less worried about Ladd and more worried about the system and the offense they run.
Okay.
So I think that he's a guy that, may have been a little bit of fool's gold. It's going to be a week-to-week guy. He's definitely, to me, much more of a best ball guy than a redraft guy. I think you're going to have some weeks where
Josh Palmer's nursing an injury.
Yeah, I think even with that, I just think it's going to be very tough. Now we'll see if they're able to kind of move him to the outside, and have him, on the field, in 2 tight end sets. Then yeah, that's great. Then I think then we finally see him kind of make that ascension. But if he's only going to be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets and only playing the slot, I think that really, it makes it tough. He's got a larger hill to climb. So I thought overall they showed well. I definitely think that, given kind of what we saw this past weekend with the level of football play, they're probably a bright spot, the rookie wide receivers and how they showed out.
I think so. Yeah, the Josh Palmer injury, he was limited at practice, but this was an ongoing knee injury that he played through just fine in week 1. So there's no major concerns with Josh Palmer. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Ladd McConkey's much better. I don't think there's any question Ladd McConkey is going to seize control of this passing game as the number 1 option. I think there's more big things to come. I'm not saying he's Malik Neighbors. I'm not saying he's a lock button wide receiver, but I was impressed with McConkey. I'm sure you were, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. There's just not, again, system schmistem. If there's no target competition, and I believe in the guy's ability, like with the McConkey, then I'm going in that direction. That's what I'm.
I'm sure. And I'm sure they're going to be in games where they're behind. So
yeah, I'm going to start.
That offensive line was impressive. So
it's only the best offensive line in the sport. Have you seen who they've drafted?
Yes. He's a beast.
Rashawn Slater was Like it later came out he was like hazing people because he's such a beast. In the weight room, like, and this was before the whole hazing thing, but they had these viral videos of Rashawn Slater in the weight room, and then it's of course running back X, in this case J.K. Dobbins, is going to produce for the Chargers. Right, with that offensive line, and there's gonna be plenty of time. There's gonna be plenty of time for Ladd McConkey to get open. It's very exciting. Now, Jameson Williams, he played well in Week 1. He looked great, and some people are already selling high. So, do you think he's for real, or do you think this is a sell high moment?
I think he's for real. I mean, obviously, he's not doing what he did Week 1 consistently, but I think he has turned the corner. And this is coming from a guy, you brought up the Alabama system. Hey, you play for both systems, right? But this is a guy that I was not high on. I did not understand the Jameson Williams hype. I just thought he was a fast guy. I didn't really see kind of what everybody else saw as this sort of kind of elite wide receiver. But, who knows how long they'll have their OC here, in Detroit. I think that would you be shocked if he became the number 2 receiving option over Sam Laporta? Last year, if someone told you that, if someone told you that it was Amon-Ra 1 and Jameson Williams 2 as a receiving option, you would say, oh, okay, makes sense. Let me grab some more James. You wouldn't be surprised. So I'm not going to be shocked if he ends up being the wide receiver 2. And I think people forget, that Josh Reynolds saw quite a bit of targets last year. He had a target percentage. He had a target share. And Josh Reynolds is Josh Reynolds. He's a decent wide receiver, serviceable. He's belongs in the league, but he doesn't have the athleticism and the traits that a Jameson Williams has. And one thing you got to love to see, and that they've been doing a lot more, starting, dating back to, the end of last year, is that they're getting Jameson Williams, design touches. Anytime I see that where they're scheming a play, they're trying to get the ball in his hand, that's a great thing. That's a great thing. And then knowing that he has the feet,
isn't it that they're isn't it that that's a crutch because he can't get open on his own, he can't earn his own targets?
I don't care what it is. I mean, whatever, it's kind of like he's like Debo Light analogy. We can argue
Debo Light.
Let me explain that. We can argue about how good a route running receiver Debo is, but it doesn't matter because his offensive coordinator puts him in positions to score fantasy points. And so when I say Debo Light, I'm saying it doesn't matter how good we think Jameson Williams is. If his offensive coordinator is going to put him in positions to score fantasy points, then I think he's going to be worth it. It doesn't matter how good he is.
I got to see more. I just have to see
you're
more.
I'm
a very skeptical person. I'm a very skeptical person. So in the chat, they're like, well, he was hurt in year 1, and then he was suspended in year 2. I'm like, yeah, I know. These are the reasons I'm doubting him. Yeah. These aren't reasons to buy. These are reasons to ask for more information than just 1 week.
Yeah.
The thing with Laporta that you have to like, though, is because that offensive line is so good and a guy like Penei Sewell is anchoring the offensive line, that does give more latitude to the tight end to be able to run more routes.
Yeah.
Like whoever the Chargers finally find, like if the Chargers draft a tight end in the draft next year, I'm going to love that guy. If they can finally find a tight end that can catch, not Donald Parham, right?
Hayden Hurst.
Somebody. If they could just get a tight end that has above average ability, he is going to run all the routes because they don't need him to block. That's the beauty. And that's where you have some tight ends like, let's say, Dalton Kincaid. They find themselves on these teams where the offensive line's taking a big step back. Suddenly they have to stay in and block. And then those are lost opportunities to run routes. So that's this. It's not necessarily like a frontline strategy for drafting tight ends, but it is an interesting element to tight end evaluation where you don't want tight ends that are in like situations where the team is bottom 5 in pass blocking, right? It does improve the tight end's expected value if the offensive line is well above average. I think that it's just a little nuance because the tight end position is so fucking hard to figure out, right? So Tank Dell, I had him as my number 1 buy low heading into week 2. What do you think?
I love it. I'm a huge Tank Dell fan. Was a huge Tank Dell fan last year.
Good.
Yeah, yeah. I did.
I want
we did
Tank
a main
Dell
event
bad,
last
man.
year.
I have him already, but I want more.
Yeah.
I'm
We did a
going
main
back
event
at
last
it.
year
I'm
with
going
Theo.
back at it because now it looks like he's just the number 3 and he's a rotational guy. That couldn't be more wrong.
Yeah, no, I love him. I mean, if you watch this guy play, he just looks different. There's not a lot of players that you like pop on the tape and you're like, this guy just moves different than everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of those guys. He just moves different.
Mm-hmm.
And you love that his quarterback is a truther for him, a backer of him. They went out and this CJ is a smart guy, right? I mean, if you've heard him on podcasts, if you've heard him in interviews, he is a football intellectual. So
but he didn't score as high on the S2 test as Bryce Young.
So when he goes to the organization and say, "Hey, go get that guy Tank Dell," some of us are like, "Oh, yeah, he's okay." Maybe he likes him, maybe they're friends, or maybe they had a little bit of a connection. No, CJ knew what he was doing. He saw this guy in action. He said, "We don't want to play against that guy. We want that guy playing with us." So I love that. I think Diggs scoring 2 touchdowns. With the low A dot route tree. I think people are probably a little bit lower on Dale right now than they should be. But that whole Texans offense is just it's.
I think you can get Dell. I think you can get Dell for Jameson Williams right now.
In Dynasty or in redraft? Both.
Any format. I bet there's people that'll do it.
Yeah, sign me up for that.
Just when you think, see, this is the thing. Just when you think that, the fantasy football community, they've really gotten smart. There's Player Profiler, and there's all these great shows, First and 15, and people now know they don't let their biases get in the way. They're cool, cold, clinical decision makers. You take a wide receiver that runs a 4.35, and he went to Alabama and Ohio State, right? Got drafted in the top 15, and you give him one good game, people will go crazy. They will vault him, and they will let the little Smurf, who's now the number 3 receiver, they'll let him go to get that shiny thing, the Ohio State, Alabama speed guy. They will do it. They would. I guarantee that trade's gone down already.
I need to send out some trade offers.
I'm telling you. In the chat, if you disagree, if you think I'm crazy, if you think this is never going to happen, this is not realistic, we don't have the evidence. I don't have the trade in front of me from the league, but I would bet any amount of money that trade has already gone down. Because of people's biases. 3rd round pick, 1st round pick. I'm telling you, this is how you take advantage in fantasy football. Now, these 2 teams, the Falcons and the Bengals, they're very similar teams. And they were similarly awful in week 1. And I just want to give these teams a mulligan You have Joe Burrow. He's out there massaging his wrist, which is not good. You have Kirk Cousins, who can't move. He's a literal statue, figuratively. And of the two teams, if you had to give a mulligan to one of those teams, who would it be?
It would have to be the Bengals. And part of it's because we've seen the story before. The Bengals just year in and year out. At this stage, I just am convinced it's an organizational thing. Mm-hmm. You can't create this much negative energy and expect your players to go out on a Sunday and compete against other guys, other grown men who were fighting for a paycheck and compete at the same level of intensity. You can't. When you see guys that have really excelled with this organization, that have helped this organization win teams, taking them to the playoffs, almost taking them to the promised land, both on the offensive side and the defensive side, and you don't want to pay any of these guys, that creates negative energy. We already, are aware of the Jamar Chase holdout. He decides to play. Who knows where his mind is. He's a professional. I'm not saying that he's taking games off or trying to do anything differently. He also had food poisoning and whatnot. Joe Burrow, you mentioned coming off of the injury.
Wait, what? What happened?
Either Jamar Chase?
Jamar Chase had food poisoning.
He had food poisoning or some type of GI issue.
He had an illness. That was what it was. It was food poisoning.
Yeah. Fact check that.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that was.
He still had 100% catch rate.
Yeah, exactly. But T. Higgins not being there. Obviously, new run game, and then you have Zach Taylor, who does not do anything imaginative. He's one of the few guys that comes from the McVay system that does not do the McVay types of things as far as moving his wide receivers.
He's a fake McVay.
Yeah, and then that's frustrating in itself. So this offense, which has really, didn't play in the preseason, didn't really practice in the offseason, is now going to take the field, even against what most would consider preseason as the worst team in the NFL, or projected to be, have the worst, record in the NFL. Struggled mightily. This is the NFL. You can't, any given Sunday, you can't take a Sunday off. And so I'm still worried about the Bengals. And I drafted quite a bit of Burrow. I felt like he was a value. I felt like with the weapons and with Burrow being able to overcome Zach Taylor and overcome all of these issues, that we could see the Joe Burrow that we've seen in the past. Before he got injured last year, we were seeing that return of the game. So I saw it as, okay, this is a potentially great quarterback. Yeah, we'll see about the risk. We'll see about the risk. But that situation, I'll give them a mulligan over Atlanta, just because I don't see how we see a significant improvement over over the next few weeks from Kirk Cousins, given what we saw last week.
Michael Penix. Let's go. Yeah. All right. Give me a wide receiver who has nuclear upside this week.
We already mentioned Malik Neighbors, but that's absolutely one. Okay, anybody playing the Commanders.
Yes,
has nuclear upside. I don't care who your quarterback is. Okay, and it's just going to take that secondary is lit. So, we talked about how good Baker is, and I'm buying Baker, not because of necessarily I love what I saw last week. That definitely had something to do with it, but it's not just based on that. Baker's weapons are great. They are amazing. Okay, so I'm buying Baker, but Baker also played against the worst secondary in the league. And when you watch, that secondary was absolutely atrocious last year. So I go to bed and I have dreams of Malik Neighbors just catching slants and taking them to the house, catching bubble screens and taking them to the house. Daniel Jones not really having to do much at all, but throw the ball 3 to 5 yards and letting Malik Neighbors do the work. Okay. So what better time for Malik Neighbors to have his breakout game than against the Washington Commanders? Okay, he got a little warm. He put his, put the feet, put his toes in the water last week. But I think this is a week where he absolutely explodes. So that's definitely one guy that I think I'm high on as far as having a an excellent week. Breaking the slate.
The outside corners, Jalen Johnson in particular, they're studs for Chicago. They're going to lock up Nico Collins, right? They're going to put Nico Collins to bed. Okay.
Is he going to be on Nico or Diggs?
Don't care. Sunday Night Football, don't care. You know who's going to be open underneath? You know who's going to be open out wide? He's going to be open on gadget plays, whatever it is. Tank Dell. Tank Dell is the one with the nuclear upside as well. So that my answer to multiple questions is Tank Dell, Tank Dell, Tank Dell, Tank Dell. What about a tight end streamer? Give us a tight end streamer and a defensive streamer for this week.
Defensive streamer, definitely. I think we got to attack Green Bay. Okay. Yeah. So
is that Malik Willis? Is that Malik Willis?
Yeah, it's Malik. We're gonna attack him. We're gonna. I don't know what this offense is gonna look like. It's definitely gonna be a lot of Josh Jacobs, but the Colts actually look pretty good. The Texans' offense is unreal. Okay, but the Colts actually got quite a bit of pressure. I think they have a stout, front seven. So if you were able to force Malik Willis to pass, I think you can see the Colts defense, do some numbers. And I think I forget who they play the following week, but I think they have a fairly nice schedule. So you can actually, stream them for a few weeks in a row, which is always a plus if you're streaming defenses and not having to change.
I would still start Jaden Reed. I'm not benching Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed is going to be involved on, designed jet sweeps.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's going to be bubble screens. They're going to find ways to get Jaden Reed the ball. So
100%.
Against the Colts, and they do have a weak secondary, Willis or whoever the quarterback is, you cannot let that distract you away from the alpha receiver on that particular team. The other receivers you're not playing. It's all wait and see game, but you do still want to play Jaden Reed against the Colts no matter what. No matter what. Again, it doesn't have the nuclear upside like Tank Dell does this week, but you got to play him. You've absolutely got to play him. What about tight end? Tight
end's a tough position, as we've seen from week one. But I got a couple. These are, hey, play at your own risk. We have already talked about how I'm a risky drafter, so I have no issues throwing some of these guys in my lineup. But one guy would be, from the Saints, not Taysom Hill. Definitely you can, trot him out there if you'd like, but I actually like Juwan Johnson. Okay. The Dallas pass rush is mean. I think, Carr is going to have to get the ball out quick. So I think that really kind of limits Rashid Shaheed. And I think that short intermediate area of the field, Juwan Johnson, I think we could see some garbage time. I think that's kind of one of the few weaknesses of that Dallas Cowboy team is linebacker coverage on tight ends. So I'd be looking at him.
What about the other side of the game? What about Luke Schoonemaker?
That's to me a roll of a dice. I'm going to stay away from that.
Really? Luke Schoonemaker's athletic, man, across the board. Big time athlete.
He is. It's just that's one of those situations where I kind of need to see it first.
Okay. But even then, it's the tight end position, man. They're probably going to dud out anyway.
Yeah. The second guy would be actually Theo Johnson from the Giants, New York Giants, rookie tight end. I felt like, I think he was someone who I pretty much loaded up on pre-week one, and then was kind of hearing words that, okay, maybe, Theo or maybe Grimminger is still starting. And but I think he got quite a bit of work.
Grimminger's playing tight end for the Giants, huh?
Bellinger. Sorry, Bellinger. I don't know why I had Theo on the mind.
No, it's great. It's great.
Yeah, Bellinger. But yeah, actually, I think
just so everybody knows that's listening to the podcast that's going to drop tomorrow, it's officially 12:40 at night.
Is it? Oh yeah, it's very.
Yeah, it's 12:40 where I am.
Going at it.
Yeah, and my brain is somehow still operating at a relatively active capacity, and I don't know how this is happening. I think it's just the NFL. I think the NFL, fantasy football, our audience, they're so engaged, they're so locked in. We've got 1,500 people watching live. The chat has been completely lit. It's unbelievable. And they're carrying us right now. They're certainly carrying me, I can tell you that.
I got one more tight end. You're not going to like this one. Okay, but Jordan Akins.
Oh, okay. Why would I not like Jordan Akins?
People aren't fans of the Cleveland Browns these days, but I think Jordan Akins, especially with obviously
that's the same as my Schoonamaker take.
Well, I think, I feel like they do a little bit better job of really kind of, getting their receiving tight end the ball a little bit more. And I'm just worried if Schoonamaker is going to kind of jump into the Jake Ferguson role, or if he's going to kind of remain in, like you mentioned before, the more inline blocking tight end. We'll see though. But I don't mind the Schoonamaker.
Breakout game this week. He's broken out in the past, but for this year, his 2024 breakout game, I believe this is a Pat Freiermuth week. You got to start Pat Freiermuth this week.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, you got to get Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
All right, I'll get you out of here. We're going to bed, buddy. Bold prediction, and we can go to sleep.
Bold prediction for this week?
Bold prediction for this week or the year, whatever you want to give. Give us something bold, and then I'm going to pass out.
All right, bold prediction for the year. Oh man, this is a tough one. I'm keeping you up late. But I want to get you a good one. Bold prediction for this year is that your overall QB1 is CJ Stroud.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know we saw Joe Mixon.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.